Hey, Shaun, how are you?
He's back.
How you doing, man?
Our most popular guest.
Going across the pond.
Oh, yeah. Well done, and thanks for joining us. What time is it there, by the way? It's a little later, I think, right?
8:30. 8:45.
It is 7:45 p.m.
Oh, okay, great, perfect time for you then. What you had a guy who he was 29 years in Scotland Yard, and a very experienced officer who had some revelations for you. Now you found some stuff out. Would you mind sharing what you've learned about what's going on with this worldwide pedophile issue?
So, ex-detective John Wedger came on my podcast for 3 hours, and he described how he got promoted up the ranks, and he was in Vice, and he was a detective, and he would go out and would find out about all of these cases of young girls who'd come from care homes mostly.
What kind of homes?
They were getting care homes, like they had no parents, so they were put in care homes. That's what they're called in the UK.
Okay, like a foster home,
yeah.
I guess, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
foster home, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So these girls were getting pimped out by the owners of the homes, or they had people on the streets who were pimping them out. And whenever he would build a case, and they would learn that the clients were celebrities, TV stars, politicians, he'd build these cases, and then just as they were about to
They'd take
have
them all
these arrests
down?
come down, they would all, word would come down from the top
Of
to
course.
stop the investigation.
Unbelievable. Because of their status as celebrities, and is it just the money, or is there something else there? Because it seems like money's one thing, but isn't the,
Yeah, how is it almost legal? Like, I feel like there'd be some paper trail or something that a reporter could dig up and say, why was this case thrown out or something like that?
Well, Jill Dando was exploring this. She was a prominent reporter, and she got murdered.
Oh.
So this London sex offender political elite ring has extreme power to silence people.
yeah, and I
Wow.
suppose even if you're in
sense.
protective custody in New York City and the whole world knows you're sitting there, you can still be murdered.
No, but there were some cameras on them, so they saw what happened.
Oh, right, the cameras, yeah. Well, I mean, it's money, but it's also this some kind of. Do they all have information on each other? I mean, like, what is it that supports this? Do you think?
The structure of politics in the UK is such that Prime Minister Ted Heath was involved in this. There are allegations of him buggering young boys and young boys getting thrown off boats and killed afterwards. So
Wow.
these things are protected until these people either die, like we saw with Jimmy Savile, because he was in such high circles as the royal family. I mean, with Jimmy Savile, prolific child sex offender, necrophiliac, he had access to dead bodies. He had access to mental patients. He raised millions for charity. And he was so powerful, he was in the highest circles of the royal family. When Princess Di and Charles were having marriage difficulties, Jimmy Savile was brought in to give the marriage guidance to Princess Diana.
So yeah, that is very hooked in to the highest power. But I mean, and with I suppose necrophilia is more or less a victimless crime, and the mental patients. That's debatable weight against his charity work. But yeah, there's so many real victims, and gosh, do you think that might have? I mean, I guess there's all kinds of conspiracies about Diana's death, but I mean, maybe she knew too much about Jimmy Savile.
Maybe he
the
touched
procurer.
William and Henry or whatever their names are when he was giving marriage counseling advice.
Oh, as a payment, sort of.
Yeah.
Now, what can we do for you?
Jeez.
They were cute kids, but it's just it's unspeakably dark and bleak and everything. And this is the opposite of everything that we learned growing up, especially us. Like sort of Generation X age. We still had the idea that like of the goodness of everything, of these leaders,
Especially the
and stuff.
government and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have that intuitive distrust kind of built in.
That's what covered for them. Our
our trust.
Yeah, our trust of blind trust is what covered them for so long.
Right. And so maybe now this is a time, and with the internet, I mean, like, does it seem to you, Shaun, that I mean, although it's starting to come out a little bit here and there, will they be able to contain this for like indefinitely? I mean, just out of fear.
Well, the mainstream media have completely dropped the ball. All this stuff about Prince Andrew and Epstein now is being completely swept under the carpet. So I went to Ghislaine Maxwell's house in London to film at the house, and unbelievably, we got the maid to open the door. Now, there was vast speculation online as to whether Prince Andrew was in Maxwell's house with the picture of his arm around the underage girl, because there was a prominent white banister behind them on this photo.
It's to the left,
so when you can see the bottom of it on that photo, but if there's bigger photos where you see more of it. Okay. So when the maid opened the door, my cameraman was filming me, and I saw the white banister, and I'm like, James, film the white banister, film the white banister right now, get behind me, film the white banister. So we locked it down. We have absolute verification that Prince Andrew was in Madam Maxwell's pad in London with the alleged victim, Virginia Roberts. That was the exact location.
Isn't the picture itself proof that he was? I mean, Maxwell's right behind him. Isn't that proof enough? Or were they saying that was a Photoshop picture or something?
Well, there was just speculation that could have been in any residence with any white banister.
Oh, I got you. Okay. Now, what's going on with Maxwell? She kind of showed up in that weird In-N-Out burger picture where the ads were photoshopped behind her at the bus stop and things like that. And then I haven't heard from her since.
Yeah, I believe that was a hoax, either a publicity stunt by the publisher of that book, because that book became an instant bestseller overnight with that. and the author even did an interview and said, yeah, you know, she's got reading my book and all this stuff. So she has only had court appearances that she's not attended, but her lawyers have attended these court appearances on her behalf. So it's still a complete mystery right now where she is. And also the fact that she has not been indicted, because Virginia Roberts said not only was she procuring the girls, she participated in orgies with Maxwell, Dershowitz, and Prince Andrew. So she was actually raping these children as well. And then you've got Jean-Luc Brunel. He's the guy, if this was a conspiracy case, he would be probably number 3 in the pecking order, because he was the one who provided the 12-year-old triplets to Epstein as a birthday gift. Epstein was boasting about the oral sex he had off them for weeks after, according to Virginia Roberts. God. Now, Jean-Luc Brunel, he's out of France. He runs the modeling agency, and he has completely disappeared off the face of the earth. His socials are all gone. So he may have suffered the same fate as Epstein, or he may be in hiding like Maxwell. But the fact that indictments haven't come down on either of these, because that's when the can of worms opens again, and all this criminal liability for all these other players will come about in the court system. Because once certain names are mentioned in the court system of America, agencies must take action. And that's why Epstein was murdered in the first place. But Maxwell and Jean-Luc Brunel could completely reopen that liability for this elite child sex trafficking network.
Jeez.
Wow. And is this a Western thing, do you think? I mean, or is this global?
Well, it's absolutely global, isn't it? I mean, look at ancient Greece. It was a rite of passage that they would bug out an unbearded boy.
No,
this has been going on since Socrates.
They didn't even have to keep it secret, right? that was like the golden age of pedophilia.
You ever? There's always a weird internet forum debate where someone would. It's kind of dumb, but you would say like, oh, my friend stands up, wipe. When he takes a shit, he stands up to wipe. And you're like, what? And then you find out, you do a poll, that 50% of the people stand up to wipe their, and you're like, what? I said, and it's almost like this, where it's like, where are these people that are all pedophiles and wanting to fuck kids and secret? I never run into anyone or overhear a conversation or ever mingle with this weird group of people that beat their kids and hit and fuck their kids and want to have sex with underage girls.
Have you ever had caviar?
Yes.
Have you? See, I haven't. So you'd be more likely to run into them than I would. But I think it might be a taste that you sort of grow into or something with the money, right? I mean, like there's certain things that you like. I don't know what it feels like to wear a $10,000 suit or something.
Well, whenever there's been since Trump's been president, there's been a few pedophile rings that have been busted or whatever, and it's always like hundreds or 200s of guys. How do you find each other? Where do you know what I'm saying? Like, how does it all network together and
how do they keep it out of sight when it's so common, apparently?
Yeah.
Well, if you've watched the documentary about Madeleine McCann, she was a child, an English child. The parents were on holiday in Europe, and she disappeared. And when they brought private investigators in to try and find this kid, what they did find was they unearthed this paedophile network, international, a lot of them in Europe, and they were all trading pictures of all these kids that had gone missing. So they were actually able to solve all of these cases and go to these parents, look, was this your kid? We found this picture on this, there were hundreds of pictures on the, and the pedophiles themselves, they get jobs with access to kids. So they get jobs in schools, they get jobs in foster homes, they're fostering kids. So the kids are right there on their doorsteps.
But, you go on like 4chan and you're like, oh, is that picture even legal? And I'm afraid that picture was somehow downloaded to my computer in some cache and that they'll find it. Yet then these people are trading gigabytes of porn openly on Gmail without getting anything caught. It seems so.
Thousands of them.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have people get busted with 60,000 pictures. Like, wow, that's a lot.
You had a flash drive on them with gigs of child. Oh my God.
And the teachers now. If a lot of them are teachers, which is kind of you can't fire a teacher. It's impossible. I mean, they're all hooked in with the unions and stuff, and those are a bunch of commies to begin with. So it's just it's part of this overall cancer that's just eating the whole West.
I think it's that the people that were abused as a child now can see it in the children now that are abused. So since we weren't fucked as a kid, they're not going to see me and be like, oh, I could try to get into them as a child. But they see another kid that has that look or whatever it is that they recognize because they were in it too, and they know they could prey on them.
Well, the ones that were victimized become like
victimizers.
Yeah,
predators, right?
Yeah.
To an extent, that does happen, but there's also the fact that what my law enforcement people are telling me that when they arrest these guys, they'll play that card, they'll exaggerate that they've been abused to try and get that as a mitigating circumstance at the trial. Now, John Wedger, the police detective, also told me that when he first started investigating the paedophiles of London, they have to be housed within a certain jurisdiction, and they'll tell that jurisdiction that they're a registered sex offender. So to avoid that, the paedophiles would get riverboats, and they would move from jurisdiction to jurisdiction because you have to be in a residence for, I think it was like 60 days before you had to file. So within that 60-day period, they'd move the riverboat to another jurisdiction, and they just keep moving further and further around London to get.
I kind of like the
away with this.
You mean as a group?
Or just like individuals, like you'd say, you'd move into a house. If you moved into a house after 60 days, you'd have to register that I'm a sex offender.
Right.
So they just pull into like a pier, I guess, or something, and live there for 59 days and then move on to the next pier.
No, I understand, but I mean, just one guy would have his own boat, or would they have like a? When I think of the riverboat, I think of like party
with the big,
tours and stuff,
big paddle wheel.
I mean, it really paints an ugly picture.
He said generally they had their own boats, but there wasn't a community of them on these canals.
Right.
Kind of into the ingenuity behind hiding everything. I like not what they're covering up, but I like the steps they go to cover it up. It's very.
You have to go to great
clever.
lengths to cover up something that's so widely despised and so heavily punished. If the people who actually do get punished for it, it's pretty severe and rightfully so.
Is it even?
I think, yeah. I mean, you can go to prison for a long time. I'm sure it's a pretty lengthy. I don't know how it is in the UK, but I know that here people have gone to some pretty long sentences, and they're not very popular in prison from what I hear. But I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
It's kill on sight for sex offenders in prison. I mean, I was living next door to the Mexican gang members. They had a cell with the head of the Mexicans, and his cellmate, he went to court one day, and it was on the TV that he'd molested his niece. So when that guy got back from court, they waited until a guard did the security walk, so they'll have at least 30 minutes to torture this guy. And I've never heard such noises in my life, like cats getting tortured in the night. This guy was wailing. And 30 minutes later, he stepped out of that cell, and he knocked on the plexiglass, and he was covered in blood from head to toe. And the guards let him out, and we never saw him again. Whether he's dead or alive, I don't know. Jesus. Another sex offender that they got, they beat him almost to death. He was in the shower whimpering in a pool of blood, and the big guy goes, "You've not beat him enough." It's like crack, 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 crack. He's trying to smash this guy's head open like it's a coconut. And when he got carried on the stretcher, there wasn't just blood coming out of his head. There was yellow fluid, like brain stuff, coming out of his head.
Oh, my God.
It's the kind of thing that happens. And this is the stuff that you saw firsthand and stuff. And how old was the guy's niece?
She was, I think, like 14 or something like that.
I mean, that's on the line. I mean, it's terrible. But I mean, like, that's
Especially
one instance of, incest, and what you would call, I mean, like, I thank God sometimes, I mean, like, look, kids look different now than they used to, and this guy it sounds like he got just desserts, yeah, it's like, things are, it's harsh and rightfully so, like I said, I'm sure. It's just, that kind of torture is also, like, this is not Geneva Convention type shit or anything like that, so I'm sure that they just really, as you said, it sounds like it was very painful.
Do you think that niece is jealous of the Epstein victims because they got like private jets and abuse?
Some of them got settlements, but I mean, I don't think anybody got enough out of it to feel jealous of. But
no, I'm saying other victims that like just got victimized and didn't. At least Epstein.
I think you're thinking more of the Weinstein victims.
No, I'm just saying like. They got taken on a private jet or whatever and taken to this private island, and I'm sure it was a really nice house and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Most victims are in way worse conditions.
The important thing is Me Too is over.
Yes.
And that brings me to this question. I'm curious, what people got so outraged, especially women, about the actresses in the Weinstein case and all of the other stuff that came up through that, employer stuff, sexual harassment. But with this stuff, we're talking about like torture and forced rape, and they force these kids to rape each other while they watch, and it's in the church, and it's in, how come the outrage isn't the same? Is it just because the press won't get behind it and make it so?
Well, did you watch the recent documentary about Weinstein on Netflix, Untouchable? Mm-hmm. He was employing some of the same methods as Epstein. When these victims made these allegations against them, in both cases, they had these victims take settlements and then sign non-disclosure statements. Epstein was tied to Mossad. Weinstein brought in ex-Mossad guys to terrorize these victims, to follow them around, to stalk them, and even police investigators against him. He's got all these ex-Mossad guys following him around. Just going back to the prison point you made earlier a little bit, even guys who are like late teens or 20s who have sex with a slightly underage girl, and the mum gets pissed off and she calls the cops. Even those guys, there's no mercy for them in prison. It's KOS for sex offenders, kill on sight, or SOS, smash on sight, beat up.
Wow.
And the attitude of the prisoners is, you said about pedos getting long sentences, but a lot of them don't. Look at these Catholic priests; they just move around from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. If you watch Sins of My Father, in America right now, there are people under 3 strikes laws serving life sentences for weed possession, and you've got child molesters getting short sentences, slaps on the wrist, and that really upsets the prison population. It's called convict justice, and that's one of the reasons they try and kill these guys when they come in.
Yeah, because maybe they're locked up forever on something much less. I can see where that would set up a kind of resentment.
And pedophilia isn't really something you could go to therapy over. I don't think you could just all of a sudden stop liking children once you do.
No, you can't.
It's not
be
like
cured.
yeah.
Apparently it is something that's like once it's there, it's there. So, what is the solution when there is somebody who is a pedophile? I mean, to take them out of circulation forever?
I think they should do some studies on castration or chemical castration and see if that works.
Yeah. Some studies. Well, Shaun,
Get corn pop with his rusty razor blade.
whatever it takes, right? We're grateful you're on, Shaun. Thanks so much for coming by and talking to us. It's really informative, and thanks for everything you're doing. And it definitely is important, and we hope to check in again with you soon.
Anytime. Toodaloo from London.
All right. Thanks, Shaun. Everybody go to Shaun's channel on YouTube, Shaun Attwood, ShaunAttwood. And that is, that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, who knows what's